Howdy everyone, good morning and welcome to another episode of MC Commute. My name is Michael Gilbert, the host of this week's episode, and today we will be we will be commuting. Was that my out loud voice? We will be commuting to the Motorcyclist offices aboard the 2020 Kawasaki Ninja ZX-6R. This is a middleweight super sport machine. Now, we got a lot to talk about. Why don't we get on the road? All right, guys, the 2020 Kawasaki Ninja ZX-6R. And this has the Kawasaki racing team, the KRT livery on it, which is another $300 on top of the MSRP, and we'll talk about that as we get on the road. Obviously, the Kawasaki Ninja ZX-6R here in the United States, as well as other markets, has the bigger displacement 636cc inline 4 power plant. Kawasaki has given it that bump in displacement to create a little more flexibility, a little bit better ride on the street. Not as track focused, but definitely it does have some racetrack intentions, as you can see here with a very aggressive chassis, super sport ergonomics. You got the big Nissan 310 millimeter Nissan calipers clamping to 310 millimeter discs. Obviously, you got the iconic Kawasaki Ninja ZX styling. This one to me looks a lot like the Kawasaki Ninja 400, just the shape of the fairing. You have the dual LED headlights, you have LED taillights out back. So, guys, this is a great looking machine. I'm really excited to tell you about this. Why don't we fire this thing up and get on the road? I love 600s. I love the middleweight inline 4 class. It sounds so good. It's like the heydays of racing all over again. Now, we got to get on the road. Now, obviously, the Kawasaki... Oh, geez Louise. Alright, we're back. The Kawasaki Ninja ZX-6R comes with the 636cc inline 4 power plant. Now, that's obviously a bit bigger than the typical 599cc power plants that you'd see in the class with the YZF-R6, with the GSX-R 600, with the CBR 600. Now, there's a couple reasons why Kawasaki did that. Kawasaki essentially did that to make it a little bit better of a street platform. Obviously, those high revving 599cc inline 4s might not make the best motorcycle to tool around on the streets. The extra 36cc's or 37 if you will, just gives it a little bit more flexibility, allows you to have a little bit more torque, have a little bit more flexibility in gear choice, and really just be able to ride the bike without screaming it at 15,000 RPM to make power. And to that exact point, guys, I actually put this Ninja ZX-6R up on our in-house dyno yesterday, recording horsepower and torque measurements. Now, this bike recorded 109.7 horsepower at 13,500 RPM and 45.2 foot-pounds of torque at, I want to say, 10,500 RPM. Now, I also went back to the last time that we had a Yamaha YZF-R6, the bike that most people say is the class-leading machine, and compared them. Now, the peak powers are similar. The Yamaha YZF-R6 made 100 horsepower at a similar RPM figure, somewhere around the 15,000, and it made 42 foot-pounds of torque. But, you know, obviously those peak numbers sound similar, but what I found really, really interesting when I overlaid all the graphs is that the Kawasaki particularly makes significantly more torque from idle all the way up until its red line, and also more horsepower just all the way throughout the mid-range. In fact, at 8,000 RPM, the ZX-6R made something like 12 to 14 more horsepower, and also very similarly 10 more foot-pounds of torque at that same RPM than it did than the YZF-R6 did. So what you get then is particularly a boost in the mid-range. I love this bike. It sounds so good too. You get a nice boost in the mid-range that makes it a little more applicable around town, and not feeling like you have to scream it so much, as we talked about. Oh, this guy's ripping. Nice, man. The guy was dancing. He's all ready for Halloween. Typically, you see manufacturers conform to that 599cc displacement, and that often has to do with racing regulations. Now, the 636 obviously is a little bit bigger than that, but it is still homologated for certain racing series, particularly here in the United States, the Moto America Supersport Championship. And I have to give a shout out. Richie Escalante actually won the 2020 championship aboard a Kawasaki 636. So even though this motorcycle has more street-oriented intentions, it is highly capable at the racetrack, as Richie's results say. Now, the Kawasaki, obviously it's got the little bit bigger displacement, it's got a little bit more mid-range, it's got a little bit more peak power as well. Now, it also has an electronic suite that is used to tame this machine as well. You get two ride power modes, that being full and low, that's accessed over here on this left hand switch gear. Now we're in full power mode now. If you switch into the low power mode, that is going to give you roughly 80% output in comparison to peak output. Now you also get 3 traction control settings at plus off. You have 1, 2, and 3. 1 and 2 are sport oriented. They're designed to deliver performance on corner exits and allow you to rush off of the corner without feeling held back. Now number 3, we could call that somewhat of a safety net. You know, somewhere where maybe you're going to ride in the rain or iffy conditions or whatever it may be, that's gonna kill the power a little bit while the bike is cornering. So why don't we change that? Why don't we change just to level 3? Let's see what it does. You know what? Why not? Why don't we I want to... Alright, we're in low level 3. Let's see what happens with this bike now as we hit this right-hander. Yeah, you can actually hear the TC kicking in as you get off the corner. Now, it's nice to see this sort of adjustability hitting these middleweight supersport machines. Kawasaki actually says that I'm just going to turn it all back on now. Kawasaki actually says that the traction control strategy, the KTRC, is actually derived from the Kawasaki ZX-10R. That's the flagship leader bike, and also the Kawasaki Concourse 1400, I believe it is. They derive these traction control settings from those 2 models. Another interesting feature about this bike, or nice feature to have, is the Kawasaki quick shifter. Now that's going to allow clutchless upshifts, as you can see. As you work your way through the gearbox, it does not allow auto blip downshifts, but this transmission, is very, very smooth. I'm actually particularly impressed with this 6-speed gearbox. It's a cassette style transmission, so you can actually pull it out quickly and very easily. Maybe if you are at the racetrack and you're going to get super high tech, change all those gear ratios, but the gearbox is silky smooth. It's actually one of my favorite aspects about this motorcycle. Not only is it silky smooth, but it does have the assist and slipper function. The slipper function obviously allowing clutch slippage in the case of high back torque. Maybe if you hit an accidental downshift or a downshift too quick, it will help you from preventing up the rear wheel and allow you to just kind of continuously just glide into the corner. Now, we talk about a silky smooth silky smooth transmission. Honestly, this whole motorcycle is very, very smooth and very neutrally balanced. That goes along with the chassis as well. Now, the Kawasaki's obviously given it the perimeter style frame developed from its racing endeavors. Oh, nice move, no blinker. Now it also has the Showa split function fork, big piston fork. Does that sound right? It's the big piston split function fork. Now what that means is that your adjustability has full adjustability, so you actually have rebound and compression over on the right side fork and preload on the left, and they're right there on top of the fork caps. Makes it really easy to adjust. You know, I have to say I'm really impressed with this motorcycle and what Kawasaki has done in terms of balancing big hit compliance and you know, the ability to soak up small shutter bumps, if you will. I found that, you know, when I'm out on the open roads, on the back roads, really kind of ripping and tearing on this bike, it has a lot of support that will handle a lot of input. And I'm gonna let this nice young lady move over. Has a lot of, that can handle a lot of hard braking, hard acceleration, and never really get out of line. But as you ride down the road, it's like a magic carpet ride. I love this thing. I really do love this bike. Kawasaki ZX-6, super smooth feeling and really good feel from the brakes as well. It's obviously, this model has ABS. And typically, you know, this ABS, I haven't really had an issue. I feel like it does a good job of intervening when needed, but doesn't feel like it's pulsing so much in my fingers when I do get to hard stops. I like that. I don't like too much ABS intervention. It takes away from the visceral riding experience. And sometimes if it does pulse too much, like I say, it kind of hinders your ability to actually stop the bike. Like, you don't know how much brake pressure you're actually going to get when you pull the lever. So good job to Kawasaki on refining that ABS intervention. You know, if I had to pick one thing about this motorcycle that I just really enjoy, is just how smooth this motorcycle actually is. Obviously, we have talked about the suspension. It's also got uni-track linkage system in the rear with a Showa rear shock that is also fully adjustable out back. But what I mean with this bike is, like, it's just so smooth and so easy to ride. The fueling, the throttle response, the transition between on-off throttle that I'll show you guys here in a minute is so approachable and so easy to ride. It doesn't feel notchy, and I really appreciate that as we go to get on the throttle here. Nice clutch feel also, and it also, oh man, we're just hitting every red light. Nice clutch feel that kind of just allows you to get off the light. And when we go back to talking about that flexibility of the engine, we can easily get going from second and sometimes even third gear. Oh, well, now I just totally contradicted myself. Oopsies. Rider error. But super smooth motorcycle feeling, transmission as we talked about, vibrations even, and we'll talk about that as we get more on the freeway. This bike just kind of glides down the road, and I really enjoy that. Now, I know a lot of you guys are going to argue against the middleweight super sport class, and you have reason to. Obviously, these bikes like to scream, and if you don't give them the scenario, the roads to let these bikes scream, they sometimes get a little bit more difficult to ride and maybe not the most enjoyable experience. But I have to argue with the Ninja ZX-6. That extra little bit of torque, that extra little bit of power, especially in the mid-range, makes this bike so much more enjoyable and easy to ride. I was pleasantly surprised. You know, I've spent, honestly, probably 10,000 miles aboard one of these out at the racetrack, coaching, but I haven't really spent a whole lot of time on the ZX-6 on the street until the past couple weeks when I was given this test unit. Now, We're gonna let this guy go. Now, I am really surprised just the overall rideability, as we've talked about, and how smooth it is, and how much fun it is. I really I appreciate this bike. I took it up to California's Palomar mountain, and everything about it, as I say, the neutrally balanced chassis, the power, the gear ratios, second and third gear is just perfect for those back roads, and you don't feel like you're having to really wail on it to make it go anywhere. It just, from, like I say, from 6,000 to 8,000 RPM, the power is plentiful and it will get you off of the corner. Really enjoyable motorcycle. Coming up to the roundabout, let's put this chassis to the test, see how composed she really is. This bike also rides on OE fitted Bridgestone Battle Axe S22 tires, some of my favorite tires, some of my favorite street tires on the market. They offer plenty of grip and plenty of feel as well. I'm actually really impressed. I've ridden these at the racetrack as well with no issue whatsoever. All right, let's see if we can get the outside line around these guys. Heck yeah. Little hiccup there when we hit that bump, but overall really balanced, super confidence inspiring machine. All right guys, we are on the California Super Slab Highway 5, headed to the Motorcyclist offices. Now, I'm not going to sit here and lie and argue and say that a super sport machine is the best bike to have on the open highway, but I will tell you that it is pleasantly surprising at how comfortable this bike actually is. As we talked about, the suspension just kind of glides down the road. The engine, we're sitting about 7,000 RPM just doing highway speeds here with local traffic, and very few vibrations going through the chassis. The only thing that I really get is a small hint of vibrations through the foot pegs. I think it's totally manageable. Obviously the ergonomics, this is a full super sport ergonomic package. Bars swept back, the foot pegs up and back underneath you, putting you in an athletic stance to really manipulate the bike underneath you as you go around the racetrack or the canyons. But it's not overly compact. Like, I actually feel pretty comfortable riding down the road. Obviously now you obviously have the fairing and the windscreen, which, you know, we love these naked bikes and their ergonomics package. They're a little bit more relaxed, but a lot of the times with no fairing or without an accessory fairing or windscreen, it honestly becomes a little bit more difficult, a little bit less pleasant to ride down the highway, just because of the wind blast. You feel like, okay, I'm in this comfortable ergonomic position, but now because of all the wind blasts, I'm constantly having to pull myself back up onto the handlebars to try and not slide off the back of that bike. So I appreciate the Super Sport. I appreciate the fairing that we do have here, the windscreen. It does offer good protection. If we tuck in a little bit like this, it actually gets pretty quiet and very calm behind. Now, we also got these mirrors. Typically, particularly on this Kawasaki ZX-10 mirrors, I'm not really a fan. You know, I'm not really a fan of those, but on the ZX-6, I don't know if it's the less vibration or what it may be, but I have a really clear picture of what's going on behind me. And it has decent surface area as well to really paint a picture of what's going on around me at all times. We're on our commute. We're cruising down the highway. We got to talk fuel mileage. Fuel mileage on this bike, I've been averaging anywhere between 32 MPGs when I'm really wailing on this bike, and sometimes I've seen as high as 39s on this bike when I'm just cruising down the highway to and from the office. So expect mid-30s. Now, you have a 4.5 gallon fuel tank. I would expect You can get roughly 115, 120 miles out of a tank. I headed up to Palomar Mountain the other day, and I pulled into the fuel stop with 117.1 gallons on the trip meter. And you know, it was pushing it. It was blinking at me, but we comfortably made it. I think that I had probably another 0.6, 0.7 of a gallon left. So you can expect around 120 miles depending on how you ride. Now, Kawasaki has also fitted this ZX-6R with a digital / analog style dash, and I can't argue against that. You obviously have the analog tachometer, which is one of my favorite things. Very easy to read, very easy to know exactly where you're at all times. A little bit of traffic here, and then obviously you have your digital gauges over there on the right. You have the gear shift, the gear indicator. You have your clock, your fuel gauge, your temperature gauge, your trip, your traction control, your ride modes. It has all of that just to inform you what you need to know while you're riding down the road. And I think it's a very nice layout. Like I said, I love the analog tachometer, and then the actual digital layout is pretty easy to read, big enough to see as you cruise down the highway. I like it. Let's go down a second. I don't know how fast this guy is gonna rip, but I want to rip. Super composed chassis. I really love this bike, especially on roads that maybe are a little foreign. I have a lot of confidence in the chassis, just being so easy to ride, like I say. Now, obviously, Super Sport, we talked about the position being a little bit cramped. The bars are swept back, the foot pegs are up and back. My legs, even on this short little commute, get a tinge of cramp, and I don't really think that you're going to be able to avoid that. Maybe if I were to have this bike as a long term, I would put a set of rear sets on, maybe drop them down for the commute or the long hauls, but then bring them up and back when I want to head to the canyons or the racetrack. The seat also goes along with that. It's race inspired. I mean, what are you really going to say about it? It's a little bit stiff. It communicates through you, or to you, through the seat, of what the chassis is really doing underneath you, which is a good and bad thing. Obviously, it's not the most comfortable on the road, but when you're really wailing, you'll have a lot of feel through the chassis, like I said. Let's let this thing... It sounds so good. I think it's that airbox just singing as you get on the gas. It sounds so good. Alright, guys. Ready for a little wheelie? Nice. I struggled there the first time, but we got it. Alright, guys. Well, that's about it for our MC commute aboard the Kawasaki Ninja ZX-6R, this 636cc inline 4 middleweight. You could almost argue this is a little bit of like a middleweight plus bike, just a little bit bigger than your typical 599cc, but obviously, as we talked about, that gives you a little bit more flexibility, to ride this bike. I think that little bump and displacement makes a much better street bike. As we talked about, it has a little bit more torque, specifically in the mid-range, that 8,000 RPM mark that we've talked about. A little bit more horsepower as well. It's not much. The peak figures are not much, like I talk about, but in the mid-range there, it really gives you a little boost, and it goes a long way. So the 2020 Kawasaki Ninja ZX-6R, this is obviously a middleweight super sport machine. Now, a lot of people will say this class is dead. I ask you to at least try and swing a leg over, take one for a demo, at least try the Ninja ZX-6R, because I think this will change your mind on the class a little bit. If you're looking for a super sport machine that's a little bit bigger than maybe a Ninja 400 or a YZF-R3 or that lightweight category, but you don't want to break the bank and you're maybe not ready for a 1000cc like a ZX-10, this is a great platform. It has a ton of street potential, as we talked about, super smooth. The chassis is very communicative, but also just glides down the road. That engine that we talked about, it has the really it has that electronics package that just kind of complements it. Obviously the Kawasaki quick shifter as well. I really enjoyed my time on the Kawasaki ZX-6R. Now, this is the one with the Kawasaki Racing Team livery, the KRT, inspired by their World Superbike platform. This model, as a 2020, runs at $11,299. Now, the base model 2020 non-ABS is only $9,999. ABS model being $10,999. Now, taking a quick look at the Kawasaki site, there will only be one model available. ABS, it comes with ABS standard, and I want to say off the top of my head that is $10,299 for the upcoming year. So that's actually cheaper than the YZF-R6, than the CBR600, than the GSX-R 600 as well. So you have a lot of potential packed in this somewhat budget conscious, relatively inexpensive platform. So have a look at the ZX-6R. I really enjoyed my time with it, and I think I'm going to go probably just ride home and ride back again just to get a few more miles. So, all right, guys. Well, that's it for our time aboard this motorcycle. If you like this video, be sure to give us a like, comment. We want to hear from you, and subscribe to the Motorcyclist YouTube channel, and we will be delivering a whole lot more of these. Take it easy, guys.